Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Arts and Lecture presentation with Dr. Felicia Darling. Felicia and I both serve in the College Skills Department, where she joined us as a newly hired tenure-track faculty member last year. I've come to appreciate Felicia as both a valued colleague and a kindred spirit who has two key passions that I happen to share with her, and I want to share those with you also. First and foremost is Felicia's passion for encouraging, empowering, and engaging students. The 3 E's, if you will. Felicia encourages and empowers students by helping them see that possessing key attitudes regarding their ability to learn, such as having what we call a growth mindset, and just a little bit of an explanation of that. It's as opposed to a fixed mindset where people believe that, for example, you come born into the world with a math gene or something. That is not true. It turns out that growth mindset is speaking to the fact that every one of us has a capacity of being able to learn throughout our entire lifetime. Our brains are fairly malleable. And with the appropriate way of practicing and things like grit, perseverance, and stuff, we can learn just about anything. And that's a growth mindset perspective, and she has that. Secondly, she then seeks to engage students with mathematical content, specifically developed from this growth mindset perspective. For example, she provides opportunities for students to work collaboratively around tasks that have a very low entry point. We call that a low floor, and yet they are complex enough that you can have what we call a high ceiling. They are challenging at all levels, and they are capable of being able to be entered into easily, and yet they are rich and deep, providing much opportunity for engagement and learning. Felicia's second passion involves what I would describe as the 3 I's. She's inspiring and influences those around her. She investigates via research, as we are going to see today, and she improves her own and others' educational practices. In other words, she's a change agent for those of us who are instructors. This passion of Felicia's to improve her ability to teach and inspire others around her to do the same, thereby serving as a spark plug to building a community of practice within our department and beyond, seems to know no bounds. On at least a weekly, perhaps daily basis, I find myself in conversation with Felicia about a possible new course or a discussion surrounding how an activity that she tried in class went, and the list goes on. I know I'm not the only person who benefits from these aspects of Felicia's second passion, because I know she has these same kinds of conversations with just about every instructor and administrator that she comes in contact with. As far as the investigative portion of her second passion, I would point to her recent efforts to write a book that embodies her desire to, and I quote, this is from her website, promote instruction that fosters engaging, interactive learning environments in which first-year college students from all backgrounds feel safe to take risks, make mistakes, share their unique approaches to learning, and develop identities as powerful lifelong learners and professionals. This is from her upcoming book that she hopes to have published in January, which is called Teaching It. I hope those of you who are instructors or administrators would take the time to buy a copy of that or explore it. Activities associated with production of this book included interviewing instructors here at SRJC, which have been posted on YouTube if you're interested, and hearable via podcast, thereby demonstrating her desire to build a community of practice around improving everyone's educational practices. I believe that today's presentation, titled Making Cultural Assets Count, Funds of Math Knowledge in a Yucatec Maya Community and Middle School, will provide you with a glimpse of these twin passions of Felicia's that I see on an almost daily basis. Without further ado, may I present my colleague, Dr. Felicia Darling.
I think this is working, yeah. I almost cried a little bit there. That was very sweet, by the way, Carlos. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, that's right, double mics, that's not good. I'm sorry it's hot in here. That's not my fault. But we are trying to make it not be hot in here because 76 is too hot for sitting around. And if you fall asleep, drool on yourself, we understand. But I'm going to try to keep it exciting so you don't do that, okay? First, I'd just like to say that I presented on my research at Stanford, Berkeley, in different countries, and I'm more nervous today than I was in those places because I care about you. I really care about my students, and I really care about my colleagues, and I feel like this is my forever job. So I feel like more nervous that I want you guys to walk away with something that you like, that you're like, oh, that was cool, wasn't a waste of my time. So I'm a little more nervous in a weird kind of way than even some of the places that maybe other people would make them nervous. Anyway, let's get started. You can see the name there of everything there. So I've taught for 30 years. I also lived in poverty for at least a decade. And when I went to Stanford, I got really tired of hearing words around poor students, this deficit kind of talk like, poor students don't have as many words when they enter first grade. Poor students' brains aren't the same. Poor students' parents don't care about college. I lived in poverty, and none of those things were true for me, and I really didn't love that deficit way of thinking because I believe instruction should illuminate the assets of everyone in the room. And I particularly care about students who are first-generation college students, students who face systemic inequities like racism, students who have had to live in poverty, first-generation college students. And I believe instruction should illuminate the assets of everyone in the classroom. It should shine the light on everyone's unique approaches, and that's my philosophy. So I did this study in Mexico, in a Yucatec Maya village. As you all know, Yucatec Maya, the indigenous populations in Mexico, have faced a long history of colonization, marginalization, and discrimination. Hey, Dean. And as a result, these are some of the causes of why math scores are quite low in these indigenous communities. Also, dropout rates are quite low. And even though I'm not going to fix that with my study, I thought, why not look towards schools and maybe going into the schools and seeing some assets of these villagers. Maybe I can shine the light on some assets that could be used for instruction in math classrooms. Maybe if Yucatec Maya students felt like, hey, we're counted, we're seen in the classroom, maybe that would improve their sense of belonging, and then math scores might improve. Maybe dropout rates would improve as a result. And that's really why I conducted this study. So I went to Mexico because a project there told me about this carpenter. They said, I'm not going to my way through this. A Yucatec Maya carpenter builds using a tape measure. He is armed with just a piece of string, a level made from plastic pipe and water, and local knowledge of the 3-4-5 triangle. Still, he doesn't think this amazing math expertise is legitimate math knowledge. I think that's a problem. So I went to this village outside of Mérida. I call it Tuncarunchu. In a study, you use pseudonyms. You don't use real names of people or cities. So this village had about 3,000 people, really high poverty rates. Almost everybody was Yucatec Maya. They spoke Yucatec Maya and Spanish. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I had some cultural insiders to connect with. And the schools in Tuncarunchu are taught in Spanish. So you have Yucatec Maya students who go to school and learn in Spanish with a national curriculum. And I went into the village, I looked at lancherias, I went into the village, I looked at the markets, I went into the village and I attended community events, and I went into the schools. So the study really had two parts. I spent 6 months doing, I won't bore you with the methods. If you want to read the article, it's published. But I went in there, did field notes and interviews, that kind of things for 6 months. If you're in anthropology class, you probably care more about the methods, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, I spent 6 months in the community, 6 months in the school, observations, videotaping, coding, that kind of thing. For anyone who's interested in that, I have an article out on that in a journal. So there's two parts to this presentation, part one in the community, and the second part will be in the school. Still working out where I'm going to stand here, so if I'm weaving a bit, that's why. I'm going to try it over here. So first, I just want to say a little bit about cultural insiders. I'm white, and even though I lived in poverty in the US, when you go to a place like an indigenous community, you can't just go in there and go, hey, I'm here now, I'm going to tell you what I find. So you need cultural insiders. So this is one of my primary cultural insiders, Jessica. And Jessica was involved in all aspects of data collection and even presenting. First time out of Mexico, she came to Stanford and presented with me in Spanish about the study. This is her graduating from high school college with a degree in accounting, one of the less than 1% Yucatec Maya who get a bachelor's degree. She was a key piece of this study, and she also helped me to develop a community advisory group. That's a group of people in the village that, you talk to, you're like, does this seem right? Am I getting this right? Should I ask this question? Who else should I ask? So that's the beginning. So I went into the community and I asked, how do you use math in everyday life? I was looking, how are they using math? I thought I was going to go to community events and see how they use fractions. I was going to go to businesses and see, I don't know, do you count in a certain way? Do you balance? Do you do bookkeeping in a certain way? I would go to, this is my favorite, pollo asado, roasted chicken place. Do you have an interesting accounting way? Do you use fractions, ratios? Do you use algebra when you're solving problems? This is an interesting business right here. There's a variety of businesses, super diverse, cobbling together incomes. This guy would go into the woods, catch birds, and then sell them. That was his business. He did not want to be photographed. I also was thinking, well, maybe I'll look at a central activity like farming. Cilantro farming was super central to the community because they were an agrarian farming community. I thought, well, maybe there's this interesting way they do geometry, or interesting way they figure out how they keep track of the cost, what they can get for cilantro in the marketplace. And I also had a focal family. What does household math look like? Are they doing recipes? How do they, double their recipe? How do they half it? This is what I thought I was looking for. I thought I was going to find some really interesting way, like anyone who's in anthropology, like Jeff Sachs, interesting way that maybe they did math. But what I found was something a little bit different. There are two major community findings. First one is what I call the disconnect. So what I found is that people thought math, I said, how do you use math in everyday life? They would say arithmetic, counting squats, doubling a recipe. They were thought of math as arithmetic and what you learned in school. And if they didn't go to school, they said, I don't do math, even when they did amazing math. So that's the disconnect. And so, like, for instance, I went to maybe 100 different people. I said, how do you use math in everyday life? And that's when I found out that they think math is school math. And if they do some cool math, they think, I don't know anything about math because I didn't go to school. So I asked Jose, the moto taxi driver. So moto taxis, they're like this. They're motorcycle taxis, and they don't have gauges. Nobody has odometers or mileage meters, any kind of indicators at all. I was going to say indicadores, but sorry, I might go back and forth. But so they don't have any indicators, and I'm like, hey, how do you use math in everyday life, Jose? I don't use math. I only went to second grade. I don't know anything about math. Oh, okay, Jose. Jose, how do you improvise in everyday life? He's like, oh, how do I improvise? Yo calculo el kilometraje. I calculate my mileage. I'm like, whoa, this is a guy who just told me he doesn't know anything about math, and yet he calculates his mileage with no gauges or indicators of any kind on his motorcycle taxi. And this is really significant because improvise. So when I ask people, do you know the word fluctuar, oscilar, navegar? Fluctuate, oscillate, navigate? They're like, no, those aren't words. That's what people would tell me. Those aren't words because they're academic words and they didn't go to school. But when I say, como improvisar, how do you improvise? They go, oh, I calculate my mileage. So interesting that improvise is part of their local vernacular, but other academic words aren't. That really told me, signaled that improvisation was a key part of their life. In fact, when I asked them later, why do you improvise? Why do you do all this? We don't have money. So it was a simple answer. And they had this amazing asset to improvise, to solve math problems, and yet they didn't seem to know it. They didn't seem to acknowledge it because it wasn't school math. So here's some examples of how Jose calculated his kilometraje, his mileage, right? So one way is he used money as a proxy. Instead of miles per gallon, he used dollars per gallon, right? He at 100 pesos, when he collected 100 pesos, he said, I know I need to refuel. So that's how he figured out how he needed to refuel. He didn't need to calculate miles per gallon because he really was calculating dollars per gallon or pesos per gallon. He also used time as a proxy. hours per gallon. He said at 1 o'clock, if I do the usual trips I do every day, I will run out of gas and I need to refuel. So he's using time as a proxy for mileage, hours per gallon. Hey, come on in. And then another taxi driver, I'm like, hey, can you take me to the next town? And he's like, stops the taxi, unscrews his gas lid, looks inside and goes, yes. Because he's using centimeters as a proxy, centimeters per gallon. So this is really, I think I documented 6 distinct ways to calculate miles per gallon, and they would really be kilometers per liter anyway in Mexico. But come on in, come on in. Oh, there you are. How you doing? Is this your daughter? Cousin, hey, how you doing? Yeah, so there were, sorry about that. Easily distracted when I see people I know. Anyway, so this is so interesting, right? Here's a guy saying, I don't know math because I didn't go to school, and he's inventing math, right? So fascinating. So the findings in the community were, number one, that there was this disconnect. I don't do math, I didn't go to school. The second finding was related to Jose's story, is that these two approaches, autonomy and improvisational mindset or improvisational expertise, were two amazing approaches that I saw all over the community in 2-year-olds and 96-year-olds. So when they approached problem solving, they were so innovative. They used autonomy and improvisation. Here's one example. In the town, no cars. Costs a lot to take even the bicycle taxi. So this guy said, okay, women need to go to the market. I'm going to build these seats. So he built this seat of his own design, and you can see the complex angles and engineering expertise. I bet if you asked him, he'd say, I didn't go to school, I don't know anything about math. But that is amazing autonomy, independence, and improvisational expertise or mindset. Another example is Adelaida, 96 years old, only speaks, she was 96 years old then, she's still alive, she's 98 now, only speaks Yucatec Maya. She was part of the focal family. Her kids interpreted for her, because everyone in the village speaks Yucatec Maya, some Yucatec Maya and Spanish. Not much of a written language, more verbal. Anyway, so there's Adelaida, 96. That's a pseudonym. So I'm going to tell you the story about Adelaida in time. So this happened maybe 80 years ago, right? So maybe this autonomy and improvisational expertise is really indigenous cultural knowledge. I'm not making that claim, but it's certainly an approach, a mathematical approach in the village. So Adelaida, when she was a kid, she'd go on work out in the fields, and she wanted to know what time it is. She doesn't know what time it is, right? She didn't have a clock. They didn't have electricity. Many of the houses still don't have electricity and plumbing, right? So she said she drew 3 lines in the dirt, 1/2 meter long. I hope you guys are converting right now to think how long that is. And there were parallel lines, and she let the sun, the sun move through the sky. She went along with it, I guess. And then she kept track. At 12 p.m., when the sun tracked there, oh, that was 12 p.m. When it went there, it was 3 p.m. When it was there, it was 6 p.m., time to go home. And so that's a really interesting example of solving a math problem with improvisation and autonomy. My final example is of these 2 kids who are flying a kite. I mean, literally, these are just 3 examples of about a lot. Everywhere you look, that's all that ever happened. So there's 2 kids, maybe 6 and 9, down by the beach. They show up. You can see their kite there. Oh, I don't have the thing. But they ripped plastic bags. They didn't have internet, no money. They didn't have internet. Ripped plastic bags. They found those sticks, broke them. They built that crossbar. Is that what it's called? Anyone know what that is? Crossbar? And then they put plastic bag for the tail. And then they went down to the sea, and they would throw it. They would launch that kite off a boat, launch it off the wall, launch it with the wind, against the wind. They lengthened the tail on the kite. They piloted this amazing construction. I have a tiny video of it. He's kind of looking at me suspiciously, but they grew to not at least, they grew to let me help them. I am the one who got it out of the Uva del Mar tree. They were like, can you get that? And I'm like, okay. So I watched them, and they were just amazing. By themselves, no parents, unsupervised, that's the autonomy. And they piloted this amazing construction. Pretty windy. That's me with the camera. So they don't get it off the ground in the video. because I was then helping them. You know, that's what a participant observer does in a study. You become part of the study, and you're kind of taking field notes. You're trying to observe, but you're also participating. So that was the only video footage I got. But they got it up in the air, and they persisted for like an hour. And my question was, after seeing this and all these other examples, when these kids go to middle school, will the middle school use this expertise, this practical mathematical expertise, to teach them math? Or will the middle school just overwrite all this and say, everything you're doing is wrong, let's do it this way? And so part 2 is the classroom. So part 1, the disconnect, they not necessarily recognizing their math expertise, but having these amazing innovative approaches. Part 2 is the classroom. So I went into the classroom, I did observations of the 3 teachers there. Olegario, pseudonyms, Judith, Noé. Olegario was been there in that village, in that position for like 30 years. He inherited his position. That was back when people inherited a position. If your uncle was a teacher and you were driving taxi and he didn't want to do that job anymore, you got that position. Now, Judith got her degree 10 years ago, Noé 3 years ago. Judith was the most like Common Core type math. She had some group problem solving, had a couple, the handshake problem. If you're a math teacher, you're familiar with that one. She had some more innovative approaches, but Olegario was the traditional style. You're Yucatec Maya, you come in, you speak Spanish, you sit in rows. I'll tell you if that answer is correct or not. Work in your worksheets. That's all they were given for supplies, one book. They'd come up and he would say, right, wrong, wrong. So he was more traditional. Noé was new, so he was, just getting his legs. And Judith was starting to experiment with more kind of Common Core group activity type activities. So here's just probably a short video of just, you can see what's going on in her classroom. I don't think there's sound, but you don't really need it. She's they're in groups, but she's basically going around and kind of verifying whether they're doing it right or wrong, whether they have the correct answer, whether they're using the method she asked them to use. She did more creative stuff, like the low floor, high ceiling task that Carlos was talking about, but mostly it looked like this. And they're talking, but you notice they talk more when they wait for her to come and say to them, you can feel free to come on in. They wait for her, is that Jonathan? Hey! They wait for her to come and tell them, and then they kind of get working. And that's the classroom. So I interviewed 8 focal students. This is not them. These are students from a previous study. I have to say this is a little braggy, but I went to a Yucatec Maya thing, and so I'm actually interviewing them in Yucatec Maya there. And so I didn't use it much in the village, though I'm not good at it, but I just wanted to brag about that. And then 280 surveys. The school had 280 students. I gave these math mindset surveys out to them. This is the data collection. And there were 3 classroom findings. So what I found in the classroom, number 1 is when I gave them, and Carlos, I'm glad you mentioned growth mindset. So growth mindset, I can get better at anything. Mistakes help me learn. Taking risks and working hard pay off. What I like about the growth mindset survey that I gave to these 280 students was 75% of them in general had a growth mindset. Well, that defies all odds because in any study in the US, 40% have a growth mindset. I know that from being at Stanford for 5 years. So that was really interesting. I'm like, wow, people in this village, these students, have a growth mindset. And it made sense to me. I mean, they're out there flying kites, calculating mileage with no odometers. They could really persist and do real life problems. The problem was that when it came to math class, they had a very fixed mindset. They would be like, they thought that math problems have one correct answer. There's one correct solution. If you're not fast, you're not good at it. If you make mistakes, you're not good at math. So they had this super fixed mindset. In fact, only 28% had a growth mindset in math, where 75% had a growth mindset in general, because growth mindset is contextual. So that was a really interesting finding, which didn't really surprise me given how math was taught there and how rich their problem-solving lives were, even at a very young age. Because little kids were with their parents all the time, and so they became inculcated in a culture of improvisational artists, really, I would say. That's a lot of big words, right? So that's the first finding. They had a growth mindset in general, but in math, super fixed. And I thought, that's a problem. That's an incompatibility. To me, that was further evidence that They needed someone to allow them to experiment in class. The second finding was, in terms of classroom management, yes, the instructors did allow autonomy and improvisation, but in terms of math learning, no. So what I mean by in terms of classroom management is like, I would sit in the class and every 10 minutes I'd look around to see who was on task, right? And about a third of the class was on task and 2/3 were off task. I would be like, well, they should be taking notes. Only a third were taking notes. And then they'd be talking and they could sit wherever they want. They were given all this freedom in the classroom management wise. And I was like, wow, they're kind of out of control. That's what I thought as an outsider. But I realized that can't be true, because when a person would step into the classroom, the minute they put their foot over that threshold, the entire class would stand up in unison and go, Buenas tardes, maestra Felicia. Like it was like all in unison. I mean, no matter what was going on, you put your foot over that threshold into the classroom, boom. You're like, so they were super well behaved and super respectful, except it seemed kind of chaotic at times. So I asked Olegario, he's really the holder of the institutional knowledge, the older guy who inherited his teaching job. I asked him, I said, Olegario, what's going on here? And he said, we give them libertad, we give them freedom so they can make mistakes. That way when they screw up, they learn responsibilities. So I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. So the three teachers very intentionally give freedom so that students can do whatever you want, sit with whoever you want, do this now, do this, don't do this now, take notes now. Don't talk over the teacher. It would seem kind of chaotic, but in a way, that's how the students learned responsibility. However, in the math class, no. It's like the teacher was the authority, the curriculum was the authority, and there was one way to do math, and there was one correct answer. So their autonomy and improvisational expertise and mindset was accommodated in terms of classroom management and navigating the classroom culture, but not in terms of math. And anyone who's familiar with Annette Leroux, knows that in the United States, it's quite the opposite. That poor students, working class students, come to school and they're quite in trouble because they don't know how to navigate the culture that doesn't allow them the freedom to navigate and make mistakes. And so you'll find that a lot of times students of color and students from lower income backgrounds end up being punished, and end up feeling like they don't belong in school. Not so in the Yucatec Maya. That part was accommodated, just not in the math class. So the third finding in the classroom is that I gave students tasks. So me and the cultural insider and me got together, for you English instructors out there, cultural insider and me, not I, right? Yeah. We got together, thanks for the confirmation. We got together and we developed 2 tasks. And what we included in those tasks is we made them low floor, meaning anyone can try them no matter where they're at. High ceiling, someone could go further and expound on it if they wanted. It has multiple entry points, so people could approach it from many different ways. So we made 2 tasks and we based them on real life problems in the village. So the first task was, actually, I did this in an ethics class, and I went in with the teacher, and we said, this is their work. We said, identify 3 problems in the community. So, and these students were 9th graders, and I was like, oh, they were so aware of the problems in the community. There would be like alcoholism, mental health, poverty, students getting into trouble. They were like really aware of some really high-level social problems. I was a little taken aback by that. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were going to get into that. But anyway, the problem was to identify 3 problems in the community and develop a blueprint for how to solve those problems. There were requirements, because this is, people who know about Pythagorean theorem are going, oh, this is about Pythagorean theorem, right? The teacher, Judith, said, we need to help them learn Pythagorean theorem. It's something I taught, and they still don't know how to do it. So we developed a math task that had Pythagorean theorem, had their problems in their community, they had to work together to solve it, and they could do it any way they wanted. So the only requirement was this had to have a green space, an eco-center. There had to be a triangle in the middle with an eco-center, and then 3 squares on the outside, and you could solve any problem you wanted with those little community centers. So this one, football, right? That's a big one. What's that? Concursos, dancing for adults. A lot of them cared about the seniors and the adults and the older culture. And this looks like, I can't read that, sorry, something for young people. So this is just one example of many of the things that they came up with. And at the end, they had to like calculate the cost and discover something about the Pythagorean theorem. And they did. They really persisted in solving this problem, and they worked together, and there was a lot of engagement. And the second task is very much like Jose's motorcycle taxi task. So a relative drives a motor taxi, and you have to write a plan to make sure they do not run out of gas, and they have no gauges or indicators. It was a longer problem. It had a lot of information. Actually, I asked the taxi driver to help me, what's a typical day in the village? So we put, starting here, go to the village, 5 trips to the school. We put times there. I gave information like fares and time, hoping that students could, maybe come to some of the same conclusions as Jose, using, dollars per gallon and hours per gallon and centimeters to gallon. And they came up with even more, right? They came up with those and then even more. So just going to show you just a really short video of what it looked like when they were solving these problems, these tasks, because they really did work together. And you never had to go over and help someone work together. It had an inherent glue in it. It had this inherent engagement in it. And later on, when I asked, gave them, a follow-up questionnaire and some focus group questions, they said they really liked it because it had real-life problems in it. They saw their relative in it. They got to work in groups. A bunch of people said, oh, we really liked it because we could use our sentido común, our common sense, instead of equations, like equations were this nasty, dirty thing. But I think what they were really saying is we could use our own assets, right? We could use ourselves and our own thoughts rather than sitting here waiting for someone to pour knowledge into our flip-top heads, that kind of behaviorism as opposed to social constructivism. But anyway, so they really liked it. And the big part is they persisted. I mean, this is the first time they've had a problem like this, and they all persisted, which is we know if you teach this kind of math, you know that sometimes you're like, oh God, I hope this is going to work. I hope I do the right things. Because you don't know if at the end they're going to persist or they're going to just throw the papers and run out of the room. But they didn't, which is good. But I'll show you just a little bit, just to see what it looked like with them kind of helping each other out and being engaged. This again, me with the camera, sorry. It was hot. So you can notice all the leaning in, that's like a sign that your groups are working and that people are persisting. It's a different culture, so they do different things with pencils and borrowing and hand gestures, but you can see that the whole time everyone's engaged. No one had to be reminded because it had some sort of inherent interest for them. It was really about them and their expertise and what they brought to the table instead of how well are you going to repeat back to me what I say is the correct method and the correct answer. So anyway, okay, let's see. So I'm going to talk a little bit about implications of this study. So hopefully this I haven't presented yet in Spanish, nor have I written a paper in Spanish about this. I hope to, because I feel like this shines a little light on the assets of Yucatec Maya students, and maybe if their assets could be illuminated in the classroom, they would develop more of a sense of belonging. Maybe that would help to improve math scores, to improve dropout rates, although ultimately discrimination and poverty are a big factor in that. But still, this could really help. I mean, these are people who are Yucatec Maya, long history of marginalization, who speak Yucatec Maya, who are in a Spanish-speaking school with a Spanish national curriculum. It's like, here's the book, this is the authority. And I'm thinking maybe if they could be honored and valued in their unique approaches, maybe they would have more of a sense of belonging, and we all know that's connected with persistence in college and high school. I also think that it's possible that because I come from a socioeconomically disadvantaged background, I'm pretty aware that when I was poor, I could do anything. I could just do anything, duct tape a car together. I could fix anything, plumbing. I lived in a house without plumbing and electricity. I could work around anything. So I believe that students from poorer backgrounds, rather than knowing fewer words or having different brains, actually have approaches that more affluent students don't have. So for instance, in this village, I saw toilets you had to reach in and flush like that. Ones you had to pour water into it. Students saw how things worked. We don't see that in a middle-class society. So I believe students have some maker skills, some improvisational skills, innovative skills that perhaps more affluent students don't have. And to me, that flips it on its head, this whole idea that poor students aren't this, they're not that. Maybe they have something that more affluent students don't have. I mean, how's that for a radical theory, right? Instead of just always being they have less. So I think it could be relevant for other students from poorer backgrounds. Also, just in general, I think shining the light on students' assets and their unique approaches is going to create a better community of learners in the classroom. It's more in line with current neuroscience research. And as it turns out, students are engaged. You don't have to be like, hey, you guys got to stay on task. Get off your phone. Hey, who's on their phone? No. But you don't have to say that because the tasks are so engaging and they can bring themselves into it, especially with, they're saying this new generation really wants to really put themselves out there, wants you to know them. This is a great way to focus on that. So I just want to talk a little bit about my publications. So anyone who wants to read this one, I can give you the full bibliography if you want it. So this is the methods article. It's about, most of the students are like, what the heck? But if you're in anthropology and you're going to be an anthropologist, you might find this interesting. It's how to do research, based on using my research as a case study, it's how to do research in a community where you're the outsider. How to ensure that people's insider perspectives come out through your research, that you pull that strand all the way through your research, so you're not just going into like the Yucatec Maya village and going, look what I discovered, this is mine now. It's like where you're actually trying to give a little voice to the people who are in your study, right? Instead of treating them like ants and you're just a scientist or something. But anyway, so that's one article. I also have a book coming out, as Carlos mentioned. I keep changing the last part, but it's called Teaching It. And it's about asset-based instruction for community college classrooms. And if you want to be on the mailing list to get free tips, free newsletters, updates about the book, I put the mailing list out there. You can sign up for it. Some of you got a text last night, and you're already on the list. This is another article. This one is the one about the community results, and that one is more about the classroom results. And yeah, and I think we're at the end where we can actually open it up to questions. Yeah. You can clap now, though, if you want. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, does people have questions? Do people have questions? Dean, I'm trying to get that light out of my eyes. There you go. Yeah, Dean.
Is there any chance that they could be, the Yucatec Maya could be taught in their native language at all?
Well, they keep saying in Mexico that that's what they are doing and that's what they will do. But when I was there 2 years ago, I saw no evidence of that. So that is what they say they're trying to do, that they're going to have the history and the language. But and maybe there's a school or two, but it's a language that will die if they're not careful, and there's a lot of initiatives to keep it alive. But it's not a written language. It's not with like an alphabet. They're making it more written, of course. But so hopefully, but that's what they say, but I don't know. The government, the government, oh God. Yes. What? Oh, edacademic, yeah, I know. Well, here's the bad news. If you've ever published in a scientific journal, you have to beat the crap out of your amazing ideas till nobody understands it except for 5 people. And so they can go, we hate everything you say. But that is the process, very cynical about that process. So edic and emic just means insider, outsider, but I had to write it like that because that's the anthropologically acceptable, blah, blah. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, but I try to make the article still interesting, even though, like I said, those 5 people who guard the gates of scientific writing will try to make it so it's indecipherable. Yes?
So, is there
Absolutely not. Yeah, well, the thing is, that should be, right? So that's another way to look at cultural assets, right? The ancient cultural assets. And that's what Mexico says they're doing, but there was no celebration, apart from, the school would have these dance celebrations, which were super awesome. But it's not part of the curriculum, because the curriculum is very I don't know, here's the book, here's the math curriculum, here's the ethics curriculum. And it's like one book and everybody gets one and that's all they get. Unless they can do something interesting. And I was one village, I'm not gonna speak for the entire Yucatan, I was in one village, but I saw no evidence of it there, even though the instructors were Yucatec Mayan. Yeah, that would be nice. I'm sure somebody's doing that. Yes, Regina? Yeah. I think they're flying below the radar, and I think they can do anything they want, but they're kind of fighting with whatever. I don't know what the full history of education is there, but like I said, Olegario inherited his position. He might have been a taxi driver whose uncle decided he didn't want to teach anymore, so that's where the history comes from. And then you get people now who are getting certified, which is nice. But I have to say, the Judith was the most interesting, and she said she'd go on the internet and find something. And they didn't seem to mind that she did that as long as she had that book and they were finishing that book. Yeah, did that answer your question? Okay, cool. Anybody else have a question? I'm sorry, I can't see that great. Oh, there you're way up there. I would say yes, and I have to say that my eye didn't, it was all new to me, and I was there for 6 months, so my eye went to where it went, and when I got something, that's what I stayed focused on. But my observation about girls and boys was that it was pretty equal. They were like boys that, when I'd say, I'd ask, who's good at math in your class? Equally boys and girls, people would report. Of course, the good people who were good at math were the fast answerers who never made any mistakes and made it look easy. But I did feel like that both boys and girls were good at math, people would say that. In the groups, I did not notice that boys or girls led. I did feel like boys got in trouble a little bit more. But there were not a lot of people getting into trouble. But the boys did seem to get into trouble a little bit more. Does that answer your question? Do you have any other questions about gender? It might make me think a little bit more.
Yeah, because traditionally, especially in Latin America, women are not accustomed to thinking of themselves as math thinkers.
Oh, I did not see that at all. There were no gender differences on the surveys with the mindset or with, no, there were no gender differences like that. But it's a pretty isolated village, so I don't know. I just have that one experience, couple experiences. Yeah, I see what you mean, though. I'm sorry. Yes.
I wanted to know about the language background of all of the students. So some of them were Yucatec Maya, were some of them?
They were all Yucatec Maya. They were all Yucatec Maya.
And so they had started learning Spanish at school, or did some of them come with some Spanish?
I was only at a middle school, but I would suspect that Yucatec Maya was I'm sorry, should I have waited? I don't know. No. Okay. Yucatec Maya was spoken in every house that I went into. Sometimes parents and grandparents only spoke that. So I assumed that everyone learned. Then there was very few people who had bachelor's degrees in the parents' generation, but one family, people seem to be a little more bilingual, but I would say that the first language at almost all the homes was Yucatec Maya in that village.
And one more question.
Yeah.
I noticed they're wearing uniforms. So
yeah.
Did they have to pay to go to school? Did they have to pay for their uniforms?
It's really ugly there. It's really ugly because they're guaranteed to go through 9th grade. And then students, so my cultural insider, she was so poor. Her mother died while I was there due to inadequate health care. They didn't have plumbing. They had kind of electricity. And I said to Olegario, I said, oh, she's really poor. I feel bad. He goes, oh, God, she's not poor at all. So they were really, really poor. And the only reason she got to go to high school in the next town was a project. Proyecto Isaias paid for that. And so that 4 pesos that it takes to go to the next town and the books, you know, maybe like $50 a year to go to school, they don't have that. So a lot of people don't go to high school just because of the money. I forget what your question was, though.
I think I asked them, do they have to take it to that school?
They do not have, they're guaranteed up to 9th grade. They're all given that one book, right? So they all have all the equipment you need. And I think they have to pay for those uniforms. Some of them had like holes. Maybe they're given one, I'm not entirely sure. But that really did equalize the playing field in terms of, I guess some people were really, really poor. I guess I don't even know what that means because my cultural insider to me was really, really poor. Yeah. Dean, did you have a question? Does someone else have a question way up there? Because I can't see that well. Dean, did you have a question?
Yeah, people I've known from Yucatec Maya culture tended to say that I've known have tended to say that their relatives who've gone off and gotten educations have left Yucatec, come back Spanish or Mexican. That's what they said. And so they were no longer part of the culture. Were the teachers recognized as being part of the culture? Were they from that village? And were they still recognized as being part of the culture? Or were they now alien to the students?
I don't think they were alien. There was a lot of respect, and I think that's a colonization kind of history, though, too. You know, it's like your teachers just are who you respect. But the 2 of them were from a different Yucatec Maya village, and one of them had been in that village forever, like Auditorium. But I didn't get the sense that they felt like they were outsiders or anything. I felt, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, and like Jessica, who is my cultural insider, she got a degree in Merida in accounting, but she's still a big part of that community. She comes back and she teaches in this project to help students get better math skills and stuff. But like I said, money is the biggest problem. But apart from that, also not having a sense of belonging in your own school because everyone teaches Spanish. You got these books that bludgeoning you with a curriculum, right? Any questions way back up there? Because I know you guys are from my class. Did you have questions? Do you have questions? No? Wait, did you have a question, Estefania? You sure? Okay. So Claudia.
I was just wondering if, are you planning to go back at the end?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get some money from the dean. Where's that dean? I'm hoping to get some money because I owe it to that village to write an article in Spanish and to present in Spanish. I've only presented in English, and I feel like that's not a sin, but it just seems wrong. It seems immoral not to share the findings and give them a chance to go, that's stupid, that's good, or oh my God, maybe we should do something different. So yeah, so I haven't had the chance to do that, but I want to do that. And if you know someone who has money to send me to Mexico, please keep me in mind. Anybody else have anything? Question? Yes.
How did the family and the village help with the education?
Say it again.
How did the family and the village help towards the school? Did the parents help the kids with homework? And did the village do anything? Were they involved with the school in any way?
Yeah, I'd say that it's a funny relationship. It's funny in the sense that I'm a cultural outsider, so I don't fully understand it, so I'll do my best to explain it. So, the focal family I looked at had the daughter who was going to college, right? So she was big on helping the kids with their homework and that kind of thing. Other families really were surviving. I mean, I thought of my focal family as surviving, but apparently they were not poor according to Olegario. So there were people who were really poor. And those guys were they were never going to go to school, so why even bother doing the homework? Because, they're going to go out, cutting sticks and make firewood and sell things, sell sodas. So it was really mixed. I think it came down to survival. If your parents owned a lancheria, you're not going to be able to go to school if it's not going to help that lancheria. But of course, there was this project, Proyecto Isaias, in town, which was helping with education and stuff. And so that's what Jessica, my cultural insider, that's how I met her. And so she was helping students in town with this separate project. But some parents are involved, some parents aren't. But I have to admit that one of the most fascinating things, and I thought, why don't I just show that video? But I didn't. We only have a minute or a couple minutes left. But they have these carnivals, and so the whole school, they spend time in the school day practicing these dances. So the school and the community are very much connected in at least that way. And parents do come to school night. And at the school, there's the principal, all the teachers come, and every single student performs. They get all this carnival stuff, and they're doing all these dancing performances. And so there's some things where the school and the community are completely wedded, and the homework maybe is a little more determined case by case, depending on the aspirations and the possibilities that their incomes will allow them, I think. Does that answer the question? I guess, well, we still have time. Anybody else have a question? Anyone's like, oh, I want to ask a question, but I don't want to. I'm so far back here. I don't know. How about you guys? You guys are from my class. Yes? Ben?
Well, some of these people you talked about how they didn't really go to school, they didn't really have that experience with being educated in terms of math. You showed the motor taxi driver who went to the second grade. But still somehow they know, like, metrics in a way.
Yeah. Well, if you're familiar with Jeff Sachs, which probably some people are, I mean, it's pretty clear that in communities with less formal schooling, there's more diverse approaches to solving problems. So these guys had to solve problems, so they had to come up with their own way of solving it, and having less formal schooling actually creates more diverse approaches. I think you'd find if we went into Santa Rosa and asked them about mileage, people would be like taking out a piece of paper, and they're doing it the way you were all taught in 8th grade math or something, or in 9th grade math or something. So yeah, I don't know if it's inherent, but it's inherent in people to need to solve problems to survive. And I think it's pretty well documented that in communities where there's less formal schooling, people have more autonomy. They're on their own, so they develop more creative ways rather than following that one way they were taught in whatever grade. Anybody else have any questions? Yes. Oh, Vanessa.
Do they still have that program?
What is it?
You know how she was like, when she went to high school, so there was a project? Or like an experiment, whatever they picked her to go to high school?
Oh, the Proyecto Etsayas? Yeah, it's pretty active, and it's always looking for donations. And she's involved, like she came up through that, became involved with it, and then she's teaching students at the community center in town. Yeah, and they still do have that, and she's part of that. Now she's an instructor in there. So, I mean, you know, people can have different discussions about whether a project from outside is a good or a bad thing, and you're welcome to have that discussion too. But it helped Jessica get to Stanford. It helped her to come present with me and to be part of a study and to get her accounting degree. Anybody else have a question? How about someone from my class? Way up there. Oh, Claudia again. Come on, wait. Where's he? Come on, how about somebody from up there? What do you think? Toby, I know you have a question. Johnny? No? Okay. You sure? Trying to do the 7 seconds of wait time. Claudia, what was your question?
I was just wondering how Cancun and all that things, I don't know, is it, they make a lot of money, all that tourists. They don't get any money from those businesses.
Yeah, it's very sad, actually. I was in Valladolid. That's where I interviewed in Yucatec Maya, and people would leave in Valladolid. They didn't live in cement houses. They lived in outdoor houses, like a palapa almost, right? It's outdoors. They're living outdoors. And people from the family would go to Cancun for 6 months, make some money, come back, give it to the family, then go back there. I always feel like that must do irreparable harm to the culture. Going to Cancun, living in a place like that, so like, I don't know, lawless or whatever, and then come back to their small community that's, they're living in a place without plumbing or electricity, even kind of outside. I always feel like that must be a really hard thing on the communities. But I think they have some minimal level of health care, because like in the US, indigenous have some sort of protections. But like I said, the insider in my study, her mother died while I was there because of inadequate health care. So that was pretty ugly. Pretty awful. One last question? Anybody have one last question before we go? Yes?
What is the
Liver disease. Liver disease. Yeah. Yes, one last question.
If I was going to go to this place, how much money would I need to enjoy myself?
Wow. To go, I mean, you wouldn't go to this village. It's very isolated, and it's all Yucatec Maya. You wouldn't go there. If you went to Cancun, it's still pretty cheap, but you wouldn't necessarily be in a Yucatec Maya village. You go to Valladolid for pretty cheap, $40 a night, and still be able to go to a Yucatec Maya village. But yeah, it's a lot of poverty. It was kind of, for someone who lived in poverty, it was kind of gutted me there for about a month till I got over it or something, whatever. Okay, we're all done. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you.